and welcome back to my crazy episodes with my Nigerian sweetheart. So in this episode, this is episode 5. Welcome back. So if you made it this far, then you already know that after my first trip to Nigeria, I returned to Kenya happier than I had ever been. I felt like I was living inside a dream. A handsome man loved me, his family welcomed me, we were talking about marriage. And before I boarded my flight back to Kenya, I told you guys Michael had looked me in the eyes and told me something I would never forget. He said, "Princess, next time you come to Nigeria, it will be as my wife." And at that time, those words made my heart flutter, actually. And today, those words sent chills down my spine, actually, literally. Because that was the moment the trap started closing around me. But I couldn't see it. Not yet. And when I arrived back in Kenya, I couldn't stop talking about Nigeria to my friends. Remember, I was a college girl, still at the university. My friends were tired of hearing about it, actually. My mother was tired of hearing about it. Even Sharon, my roommate, started rolling her eyes every time I brought Michael's name into a conversation. But who cares? I didn't care. I was in love, remember? And when you are in love, you don't just see the person for who they really are. You see the future. I was already imagining wedding dresses in those beautiful Nigerian attires. I was imagining about marriage, future children, family vacations, and the whole thing. And a few weeks after I got back, Michael called me one evening. His voice sounded serious. Not the bad kind of serious, but the important serious ones, you know. The kind of voice that makes your heart beat a little faster. He called me Princess. I said yes. And he said, I have made a decision. And immediately, I sat upright on my bed again. "What decision?" I asked him. There was a brief silence, then he said "I'm coming back to Kenya." I smiled and asked him again. He said yes, but this time it's not just a visit. And you can imagine that I could barely breathe. I asked him what he meant by that, but he said that I'm coming to ask for your hand in marriage. I screamed so loudly that Sharon nearly fell off her chair, guys. No, I literally screamed so loud. The poor girl thought somebody had died. So when I told her what happened, she hugged me, then looked at me carefully, too carefully, and she said, You are sure serious about this?" I laughed and why does everyone keep asking me that? She shrugged, but I said, "I don't know." And then she added quietly, "Just make sure you are not rushing things." And at that point, I was tired of hearing warnings that they had negative energy, so I was like, positive vibes only, you know, everything fell on they call it a deaf ear. Every warning sounded like negativity to me. Every concern sounded like jealousy to me. And every question sounded like doubt. So I ignored all of them. And again, a month later, Michael arrived in Kenya. And this time things felt a bit different. More serious, you know, more official. And this wasn't a boyfriend visiting his girlfriend. This was a man preparing to become somebody's husband. I remember I was in fourth year of my university. So, you know, I felt like a big girl. I had an international babe already. And he had visited me, seen my family, met everyone I knew. And I also visited him in Nigeria and also met every member of his family, even the aunts and uncles. So that was a man preparing to become somebody's husband, you know. And at least that's what I believed. So the first few days were wonderful. We spent time together, talked about our future, discussed where we would live, how many children we wanted, that kind of stuff, what kind of life we wanted to build. Everything seemed perfect to to me from my perspective from that very moment, you know. Then came the day he was supposed to meet my extended family. I was a bit nervous, very nervous, you know, because in Kenya, family opinions matter. Lazima aone your uncles, your guka, your aunties, your pops, and all that. Huh? So, especially in Kenya, family opinions matter, especially when marriage is involved. So, one wrong impression can change everything. But Michael was prepared, almost too prepared. He arrived carrying gifts, thoughtful ones, you know, very expensive ones. You know, Niger people, they love good things. They don't like cheap things. They love fine things. Huh? So he arrived carrying those gifts, thoughtful gifts, expensive, for my mother, my uncles, my aunties, everyone. Huh? Was involved because he had the basic knowledge about my family makeup. So even gifts for people I barely spoke to, provided they were family. So by the end of the evening, everyone loved him because what Kenya na zawadi, it was like he was from Nigeria, blah blah blah. So they would love him if he has oiled ants. Everyone, my uncles praised him, my aunties praised him, my cousins praised him, even the relatives who criticized everybody had nothing bad to say this time. It was unbelievable. Everywhere I turned, people were saying that the same thing. Grace, you found a good man. Grace, don't let this one go. Grace, Jehovah's blessed you, blah, blah, blah. So hearing those words made me feel even more confident, because surely that many people couldn't be wrong, right? Even you would feel that same way a bit. So then something happened that I still think about to this day. Late that night, after most of the guests had left, I walked outside to get some fresh air. That's when I overheard part of a conversation. One of my older uncles was speaking with Michael, actually, and I couldn't hear everything, just bits and pieces. But one sentence stood out. My uncle asked, "When exactly do you want the wedding?" There was a pause, then Michael answered, "As soon as possible." Nothing strange about that, right? Except that for what came next, my uncle laughed. "Slow down, marriage is not a race." Michael laughed too, but his answer felt odd, very odd. He said, "Some opportunity shouldn't wait too long." So at that time, it sounded harmless. Now, not so much. A few weeks later, the bride price negotiations began, and everything seemed normal. And both families talked, discussions happened, agreements were made, and eventually everything was settled. And just like that, we were officially moving toward marriage. Traditionally, he was all set. I should have been happy, you know. Instead, I started noticing little things, tiny things that didn't quite make sense. For example, every time wedding planning came up, Michael wanted things done quickly. Very quickly, you know. And if somebody suggested waiting a few months, he became impatient. So if somebody suggested taking more time, he changed the subject. If somebody suggested additional family meetings, he looked annoyed. Not angry though, just annoyed. It was the subtle annoyment, but so subtle that most people missed it. But I started noticing because I knew my man. Then came another strange situation. One evening, my mother called me into her room. The moment I walked in, I knew something was bothering her, and she looked serious, too serious. She asked me to sit down. Then she said, "Grace, I need you to promise me something." I became nervous immediately. I asked her, "What, mommy?" She said, she looked directly into my eyes and said, "If you ever feel uncertain about this marriage, don't ignore that feeling." I laughed nervously. I told her, "Mom, where is this coming from?" She shook her head and said, "I don't know." Then she said something that haunted me later. "I just feel like things are moving very fast." And at the time, I dismissed her concerns because I wanted my happy ending, you know. I wanted my fairy tale. And fairy tales don't have room for doubt, or so I thought. And then one afternoon, something happened that completely changed the atmosphere. I was at Michael's hotel. We were discussing wedding plans. Everything was normal. Then his phone rang, and the moment he saw the caller ID, his face changed immediately. The smile disappeared. The color drained from his face. For a split second, I saw panic. A real panic. Not stress, not irritation. Panic. He quickly stood up, walked outside, and closed the door behind him. I remember sitting there wondering what was happening, but 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. Then he finally returned. He looked completely different. Forced smile, forced calmness. You can tell if you know your guy. And like somebody pretending everything was okay. I asked who had called, and he answered immediately. Business. Don't worry, princess. Then change the subject. Just like that, and at the time I accepted the explanation. I didn't want to bother him too much, but something about it bothered me. And days later, another strange thing happened. Guys, one of my cousins found something online. I still remember the phone call. She sounded nervous. Akasema, Grace. Nikasema, yes. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you absolutely certain about Michael? And immediately I became defensive. Nikamuuliza, what are you trying to say? Hesitate kidogo. Then akasema, I found something strange. My heart ikaanza kurace. Nikamuuliza, what? She explained that while searching online, she had found multiple social media profiles connected to my boyfriend, Michael. Different names, different details, different information, and at first I laughed. Lots of people have multiple accounts, right? Different people can have the same name, right? That's what I told myself. And I told her the same thing. That's what I wanted to believe. But still, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted in my heart. And for the first time since meeting Michael, I felt uneasy. Guys, that night, I couldn't sleep at all. I started staring at the ceiling, thinking, questioning, wondering. And the next day, I confronted him. I expected him to become angry. Instead, he laughed. A calm, confident kind of laugh, Then he explained everything. Business accounts, old accounts, professional profiles, nothing unusual. His explanation sounded reasonable. So reasonable that I felt guilty for doubting him, actually. I even apologized. I was like, sorry, babe, I didn't mean to doubt you or anything. I was just curious. And today, looking back, guys, I wish I hadn't. Because that tiny seed of doubt was trying to warn me, trying to protect me, trying to open my eyes, guys, but I wasn't ready to see. Then one evening, just as wedding discussions were progressing smoothly, Michael dropped a bombshell that shocked the entire family. A request that would divide opinions, a request that would create arguments, a request that should have stopped everything. He looked at me and said, there is one thing I need. I smiled and asked him, what is it? Then he said the words that changed everything. He said, when you come to Nigeria for the wedding, ukikuja Nigeria kufanya harusi, akapose, akasema, staki familia yako akuje. I don't want your family to come. Anasema unapokuja ni kana kwamba he was saying it's only me who's going to Nigeria for the wedding. The rest of my family were to stay back in Kenya. The room went silent. My heart skipped a beat. And for the first time, guys, I saw genuine fear in my mother's face. Guys, this episode is to be continued. I will post the rest on episode 6. There will be a huge family argument over Michael's request. But I'm gonna defend him though. He's my boyfriend or my fiance at the moment. My family will beg for Michael to reconsider his decision. Let's see what happens next, guys. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye bye, and please click that subscribe button.